$500,000. That's what he bid, without blinking. Not for the painting, but for me. Every head turned, every whisper stabbed. And when he leaned forward and said, "Dinner with me, and it's yours," I felt the floor collapse beneath my feet. I swore I'd protect my heart from any man, but I never expected the Millionaire CEO would be able to be the one to steal it. The chandeliers dripped with light like frozen fire above my head, casting the marble floors into glittering reflections that made my stomach tighten. I shouldn't have been here, not in a room filled with the city's most powerful, their designer gowns whispering secrets and fortunes, their glasses filled with golden champagne I couldn't afford. But the auction wasn't about them. It was about me, and about him. My father. The painting that carried his signature hung at the far end of the ballroom, spotlit and sacred as if the canvas itself breathed with the last piece of him. The brushstrokes told the story of nights he spent bent over an easel, splattering colors while humming lullabies I had long since forgotten. When he died, I had sworn that piece would never be taken from me. It was the one thing I refused to let the world pry from my hands, no matter how many zeros danced on the checks waved in the air tonight. My hand trembled against the paddle I clutched. I had promised myself I wouldn't let emotion rule me. Not here. Not when these people treated art like poker chips. Yet my throat tightened with grief I couldn't swallow down. Lauren leaned in at my side, her perfume soft and grounding. "You've got this," she whispered, her words brushing against my ear. "Don't let them scare you. Don't let him scare you." I frowned. "Who?" Her eyes darted across the room, and I followed her gaze. That was when I saw him. Pierce. He stood apart from the crowd, tall, dark suit cut to his frame with impossible precision, the kind of presence that drew attention without asking for it. He wasn't laughing like the others or pretending to care about the canapes. He was simply there, still and magnetic, as though the air bent toward him. His eyes found mine with surgical precision, pinning me where I sat. I looked away, heart skittering. Lauren nudged me sharply. "That's him, the one who buys everything and everyone. He doesn't lose." I swallowed hard, clutching the paddle tighter. "He's not getting this." The auctioneer's voice thundered, snapping me back. "Lot 17, a personal masterpiece from the late Vale collection." My chest squeezed. My father's name echoed against the glass dome above. This was it. Opening bid at 50,000. Hands shot up across the room like weapons raised for battle. The numbers climbed in rapid fire. 70, 90, 120. I bit the inside of my cheek and forced my hand high. 150. My voice cracked in my own ears, though the auctioneer didn't notice. "Ah, a bit of 150, thank you." The crowd shifted, whispers curling like smoke. I could feel their eyes. She doesn't belong here. She can't afford this. They weren't wrong. But this wasn't about money. This was about blood and memory and the vow I'd made at my father's grave. 175. The words came smooth and low from the other side of the ballroom. Pierce. Every head turned toward him. He didn't raise his hand like the rest. He didn't need to. His gaze was fixed on me, lips curving in a smile too knowing, too dangerous. I forced my chin high. 200. Gasps rippled. Lauren squeezed my arm, half in warning, half in encouragement. 220, Pierce murmured, never looking at the auctioneer, only at me. My pulse thundered in my ears. I should have been afraid. I should have bowed out, let him win like everyone else always did. But something inside me snapped at the thought of surrendering. 250, I whispered, though the word clawed up my throat. The auctioneer's hammer hovered. Do I hear 275? Silence. Then, calm as a shadow, Pierce spoke again. 300. The crowd erupted with astonishment. Lauren hissed beside me. Seraph, stop, you'll bankrupt yourself. But I couldn't. My father's face swam before my eyes, his calloused hands guiding mine across a canvas when I was still a child. This painting was ours. I raised my paddle higher, fingers trembling. 3:20. A muscle ticked in Pierce's jaw. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in amusement, as though my defiance thrilled him. He tilted his head, considering me like a puzzle he intended to solve. Then his voice dropped, softer, but slicing through the silence like a blade. 500. The room gasped again, a collective choke of disbelief. I froze, breath locking inside me. 500,000. He had doubled the battlefield in one move. My knees weakened beneath the weight of it. Lauren's hand clamped over mine. Seraph, you can't. It's over. I wanted to scream, to throw the paddle down, to claw through the air between us and demand to know why he had done this. Not for the art, I realized, but for me. His eyes never left mine. The painting was nothing more than the excuse. Seraph had learned long ago what it meant to be discarded. The memory came in fragments she could never fully escape. The sound of champagne glasses clinking at an engagement party that had turned into a funeral for her heart. The scent of roses that had seemed so sweet until they withered in her hands. And the weight of words she had never forgotten. You'll never be enough, Seraph. Not for the life I want. Her fiancé hadn't whispered them in cruelty. He had spoken them with the icy certainty of a man who thought power outweighed love. She had stood frozen, watching as he slipped a diamond ring onto another woman's hand within months, a woman with connections, wealth, and a family name that turned doors into open gates. It was the night Seraph promised herself she would never let a man define her again. Powerful men, especially, saw love as currency. She had vowed not to be bought, not to be sold, not to be broken twice by the illusion of forever. Months later, when her father's health began to fail, Seraph had clung to him as her anchor in a world that suddenly seemed crueler than ever. He had been the one to remind her that worth wasn't measured in power, but in what you were willing to fight for. After his death, it was Lauren who had carried that torch, repeating his words whenever Seraph faltered. On the eve of the auction, Lauren had stood with her in their tiny apartment, arms crossed, eyes burning with certainty. You're going tomorrow, Seraph. You're going to fight for that painting. I don't care if it's men with money in their veins and steel in their voices. You don't bow to them. Not this time. Not for him. Seraph had shaken her head, fear clawing at her chest. What if I can't win? Then you make them remember you tried, Lauren answered. You make them see you won't be dismissed. That painting is yours, and if you don't fight, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Seraph had closed her eyes, her hand brushing over the worn photograph of her father by the window. Lauren's voice had wrapped around her like armor, layering strength over the cracks her heartbreak had left behind. While Seraph wrestled with old wounds and new promises, Pierce was already preparing for the night. Alone in his high-rise suite, the skyline sprawled at his feet like a conquered kingdom, he stood before the glass with his tie hanging loose and a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. Pierce had built his empire on the art of risk, on the sharp edge between victory and ruin. He thrived in spaces where men hesitated. If they doubted, he moved. If they hesitated, he struck. He had never entered a battle he didn't intend to win, and the auction would be no different. Yet when his assistant briefed him on the lots for the evening, one piece had caught his attention, not for its market value, but for its story. Veil. A name from long ago, tied to nights when he was nothing but ambition dressed in threadbare suits, scraping for mentorship and guidance. The painting carried weight, yes, but the name carried more. It reminded him of who he had been before the world learned to fear him. Pierce had finished his drink in silence, lips curving in a faint, amused smile. He would go to the auction not only for the piece, but to see what ghosts it stirred. For a man like him, sentiment was a rare luxury, but even rarer was the thrill of unpredictability. Clarita had been rehearsing her own kind of victory long before the first guest arrived. The charity auction was her stage, and she intended to command it flawlessly. Hours before the chandeliers lit and the doors opened, she swept through the grand ballroom with her clipboard in hand, ensuring every table gleamed, every floral arrangement whispered elegance, and every name on her list would feel seen. "Pierce will be here," one of her assistants whispered nervously. Clarita's smile sharpened. "Pierce always wins. That's the story people want to see, and it's the story they'll leave with. Our job is to make sure they're still talking about it next week." To Clarita, prestige wasn't in the art. It was in the drama, in the way people gasped and whispered, in the ripples of rumor that spread like wildfire after the lights dimmed. She had already primed her inner circle, telling them what to expect. Pierce Davison never lost. And when he lifted his hand, the outcome was already decided. Bryson had heard those whispers too, though he did not believe in inevitabilities. Seated quietly at the back of the hall long before the first paddle was raised, he studied the room with the detached calm of a predator watching a field of prey. His glass of wine caught the light, his gaze flicking between the gilded chairs and the polished marble columns. Pierce's reputation fascinated him, not for its brilliance but for its fragility. No man was untouchable, and the greater the legend, the more satisfying its collapse. When the veil piece had been announced on the docket, Bryson had marked it in his mind. A sentimental item could draw unexpected players into the game, and sentiment was often the sharpest blade. He had watched Pierce enter with the certainty of a king, but Bryson's lips curved into a faint smile. Kings could bleed. And tonight, Bryson would see where Pierce's armor cracked. All of these threads wove together before the first bid was ever called. Seraph steeling herself against the ghosts of betrayal, Lauren arming her with defiance, Pierce sharpening his hunger on memories and strategy, Clarita shaping the whispers of inevitability, and Bryson biding his time in the shadows. Then, the auction had not yet begun, but already the battlefield was drawn. The auctioneer's gavel hovered above the podium, the silence in the hall drawn taut as wire. 500,000, he declared, his voice ringing with finality. "Do I hear any advance?" The crowd held its breath, but no paddle rose. The air seemed to bow beneath the weight of Pierce's command, as though his voice had settled the matter beyond appeal. 500,000 once. Seraph's chest rose and fell in shallow bursts, her nails digging into the fragile paddle in her hand. Her throat ached with the words she could not force out. Lauren's grip on her arm was iron. 500,000 twice. Pierce's gaze never left Seraph. Calm, unwavering, deliberate, it was the gaze of a man who had already claimed victory. And sold. Wait! The word slipped from Seraph before she realized she'd spoken it. The hall gasped, whispers scattering like sparks. The auctioneer faltered, looking toward her. But Pierce was faster. He stepped forward, his presence slicing through the room like a blade through silk. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't need to. His voice carried enough power to bend the air. "Withdraw the hammer," he commanded smoothly. "I'm amending the terms." The audience murmured, scandal brewing in every breath. The auctioneer blinked, his polished smile faltering. "Sir, the rules—" "I make the rules," Pierce said, his eyes still locked on Seraph. "The painting is mine, but I don't want it in my house. I want it in hers." Gasps echoed across the marble. Heads turned toward Seraph as if she had suddenly been crowned and condemned in the same breath. Pierce's smile curved, slow and deliberate. "You may have it, Seraph, on one condition." The words lanced through her, sharp as steel. She knew what was coming, though she prayed she was wrong. "Dinner," he said softly, the syllables rolling like velvet through the hushed hall. "Tomorrow evening, just you and me." The silence fractured. Whispers tumbled like stones, half scandal, half disbelief. Guests leaned into one another with gleaming eyes, hungry for the story that would spread before the night was done. Clarita's lips curved as she watched from across the room, already filing the moment away for her arsenal of gossip. Seraph's pulse pounded in her ears. For a heartbeat, she imagined saying yes for her father, for the painting, for the memory of nights his hands had guided hers across a canvas. But bile rose at the thought. To accept would be to trade herself for the one piece of him she could not bear to lose. She stood. No. The word was clear, ringing across the hall like a bell. The crowd recoiled, gasping as though she had struck him. Lauren's hand tightened on hers, both in fear and in awe. Pierce tilted his head, his expression unreadable. Amusement? Frustration? Something darker? His eyes narrowed, gleaming like tempered steel. "You misunderstand," he said, his tone still velvet but edged with iron. "This is not an offer. It is certainty." "I said no," Seraph repeated, louder this time, her chin rising. "I don't dine with men who think everything is for sale, not even my father's memory." The room trembled with the audacity of it. Clarita pressed a gloved hand to her lips, eyes alight with shock. Somewhere, a glass shattered, dropped by a trembling hand. Pierce's smile deepened. Not soft, not kind, but sharp, dangerous, as if her refusal had only fanned the fire in him. In the shadows near the back, Bryson's lips twitched into a slow, satisfied grin. Oh, this was better than he could have hoped. The woman had refused Pierce Davison, publicly, absolutely, irrevocably. Bryson leaned against the column, swirling the last of his wine. The whispers rippled toward him, carrying the scent of scandal. For years, Pierce had devoured everything in his path, a man no one dared to oppose. And now a woman with trembling hands and fire in her voice had made him bleed in front of them all. Opportunity. Delicious, intoxicating opportunity. Pierce would pursue her. That much was certain. And Bryson? He would make certain she became the perfect weapon. Seraph walked toward the doors, each step deliberate, though her legs shook beneath her gown. She could feel the stairs, the whispers crawling down her spine like 1,000 unseen hands. But she did not falter. The painting slipped away behind her. She left without it, her heart breaking, but her pride unbroken. Lauren hurried beside her, eyes wide with both terror and awe. "Seraph, what did you just do?" "I kept my soul," Seraph whispered, her voice cracking, and she pushed open the doors, stepping into the night air that bit like winter against her flushed skin. Back inside, Pierce remained unmoved, standing in the center of the ballroom as though the rejection had been scripted for his amusement. Around him, the crowd shifted nervously, waiting for him to erupt, to crush the woman who had dared deny him. But Pierce only chuckled under his breath, low and dangerous. "She thinks it's finished," he murmured, his voice meant for no one but himself. "She thinks she's walked away." He turned toward the painting, now being carefully removed from the stage. The spotlight dimmed, shadows reclaiming the canvas as though it had never existed. "She's wrong." His eyes followed the doors where Seraph had disappeared, hunger burning like wildfire in his veins. For years, every victory had been predictable, every conquest inevitable. But this was a battle worth waging. He adjusted his cufflinks, his smile sharp as a blade. "She won the crowd," Pierce said softly, almost reverently. "But the game has only begun." The morning after the auction, Seraph tried to bury herself in routine. She set her brushes on the small cafe table, opened her sketchbook, and ordered a single coffee she could barely afford. It was the only way she knew how to quiet the ache in her chest. The ache of losing her father's painting and the humiliation of standing in that glittering hall, facing down a man who bought and sold the world. She pressed her pencil to paper, lines forming the faint outline of her father's face when a shadow stretched across her table. "Interesting likeness," a smooth voice murmured. Seraph's hand stilled. She looked up, pulse quickening. Pierce. He stood there in the cafe, incongruous in his tailored suit against the chipped tile floors and peeling menus. The women at the counter whispered, recognizing him instantly, but he ignored them, his focus entirely on her. Seraph snapped the sketchbook shut. "Following me now?" Pierce's lips curved. "Not at all. I own the building." It seemed polite to check on my tenants. Her brows lifted in disbelief. "You expect me to believe you came here for coffee?" "No," he admitted, sliding into the seat across from her without invitation. "I came here for you." The words unsettled her more than his presence. She searched his face for mockery, but there was only calm certainty. "I said no," she reminded him, voice steady. "And I said the game isn't finished," he returned easily. Their eyes locked, tension sparking between them, neither willing to blink first. When Seraph recounted the encounter to Lauren that evening, her friend slammed the cupboard door harder than necessary. "You can't let him do this, Seraph. You can't let him into your world even by accident. Men like Pierce don't enter lives, they consume them." Seraph leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "What choice do I have? He shows up wherever he wants. He doesn't take no for an answer." "Then make him hear it," Lauren snapped. "Don't get caught in whatever spell he's weaving. I've seen that look in your eyes. You're not just angry, you're intrigued. That's dangerous." Seraph turned away, biting her lip. Dangerous was exactly the word. The following week proved Lauren right. Pierce was everywhere. At the gallery where Seraph had applied for part-time work, he happened to be an investor. At the bookstore where she browsed for old art manuals, he appeared at the next aisle, feigning interest in hardcovers he had no intention of reading. Each meeting ended the same way. Sharp banter, her stubborn refusals, his infuriating calm. And yet, beneath her frustration, a traitorous spark of attraction grew. One rainy afternoon, she found herself trapped under the awning of the same cafe when the storm broke. Pierce appeared beside her, umbrella in hand, raindrops clinging to his dark hair. "Convenient," she muttered. "Fate," he countered smoothly, offering the umbrella handle. She didn't take it. But she didn't walk away either. Their shoulders brushed and the heat lingered long after the rain eased. Not everyone watching wanted their story to unfold. Bryson made his move carefully, approaching Seraph when she least expected it. One evening, as she left the gallery, he fell into step beside her. "You were brave at the auction," he said, his voice low and steady. "Most people cave under Pierce's gaze. You didn't." Seraph glanced at him warily. "And you noticed?" "I notice everything," he replied, "especially when someone refuses to be conquered." He smiled, softer than Pierce ever managed. "You deserve better than a man who sees you as another acquisition." Bryson was careful, never pushing, always presenting himself as the safer choice. He offered her coffee without conditions, conversation without games. He spoke of art with respect, not as investment, but as devotion. For the first time, Seraph wondered if safety might be worth choosing. But safety was not Clarita's favorite story. She cornered Seraph one evening at the gallery, her perfume rich, her eyes sharp with secrets. "You're in dangerous company," Clarita whispered, lips brushing Seraph's ear as though sharing gossip instead of poison. "Pierce Davison doesn't lose what he wants. He doesn't stop until he's taken it all. Men have ruined themselves trying to defy him. Women too." Seraph's stomach twisted. "Then he should learn that I'm not for sale." Clarita's laugh was soft, pitying. "You already caught his attention. That's more dangerous than any contract." Her words lingered like smoke long after she glided away, leaving Seraph shaken and uncertain. The storm between them finally broke one evening at the cafe. Pierce arrived unannounced, as he always did, and found her sketching alone. "This again," Seraph muttered. "This still," he corrected, sliding into the seat. "You draw as if the world might vanish if you stop." She snapped her book shut. "Why are you really here?" His gaze lingered on her face, softer now. shadows of something unguarded flickering in his eyes. Because I don't want to stop thinking about you. The words hit like a strike of lightning. Her breath caught, anger and longing tangling until she didn't know which would win. You're impossible, she whispered. And you're irresistible, he answered, his voice low. The air thickened. His hand brushed against hers, tentative for the first time, not commanding, but searching. She froze, heart racing. Their faces tilted closer, drawn by a pull neither could deny. For one impossible heartbeat, the world narrowed to his breath on her skin, the warmth of his palm, the space between them begging to be closed. Seraph. The cafe door slammed open, breaking the spell. Lauren strode in, eyes blazing, pulling Seraph back into reality with one sharp look. The moment shattered. Seraph jerked her hand away, her chest heaving. Pierce leaned back slowly, expression unreadable, but his eyes burned with promise. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The city glimmered beneath a veil of twilight as Seraph hurried across the cobblestones, the chill of evening biting at her skin. She had promised herself distance, sworn that Pierce would not worm his way deeper into her life, and yet here she was, heart pounding, summoned to a private gallery under the pretense of truth. The door creaked open before she touched the handle. Pierce stood inside, shadow and light carving the angles of his face, his gaze steady and unyielding. You came, he said softly. Seraph stepped inside, arms crossed. Only because you said it was about my father. If this is another game. It's not, Pierce interrupted, voice low, carrying a weight she hadn't heard before. This isn't about winning you, not tonight. It's about telling you why I couldn't let you walk away. He gestured toward the far wall. The painting, her father's painting, hung beneath a single spotlight. For a moment, her breath caught, grief and longing surging like a tide. She moved closer, fingertips trembling as they hovered just shy of the frame. Why show me this? She whispered. Because you deserve to know what's inside, Pierce replied. She frowned, turning toward him. Inside? He stepped closer, careful not to touch her. Your father wasn't only an artist. He was a visionary. When I was young, before the suits, before the empire, he mentored me. He believed I could build something when no one else did. He saw worth in me when the world saw nothing. Seraph's lips parted in shock. You knew him? Pierce nodded once, eyes distant with memory. He was the reason I didn't give up. Every time I thought I was drowning, he pulled me back. He taught me discipline. He taught me to risk. I owe him everything. Her chest tightened painfully. She had imagined her father's wisdom shaping only her, a sacred inheritance that belonged to blood alone. To hear that Pierce had known him, had carried pieces of him into his empire, felt like betrayal and revelation all at once. You should have told me, she whispered, voice breaking. I couldn't, he said, jaw taut. Because then you'd know that this painting isn't just memory. It's proof. He reached for the frame, pressing a small latch hidden beneath the edge. The canvas clicked, and to Seraph's astonishment, the back panel slid open, revealing a series of folded sketches tucked inside, browned with age but unmistakably her father's hand. Her breath caught. Pierce unfolded them carefully, laying them on the table beneath the light. Designs, blueprints, notes scrawled in the margins. An ambitious project, a gallery meets school for artists who had no patrons, no resources, a dream of giving voice to the unseen. He called it Haven, Pierce said, reverence softening his tone. We planned it together. He painted to fund it. I was supposed to build it. But then His voice faltered just once. He left before we could finish. Tears blurred Seraph's vision as she traced her father's handwriting, the familiar loops and sharp edges. This wasn't just a painting. It was the last secret of a man she thought she had known entirely. Her knees weakened, and she sank into the nearest chair. All this time, you carried this. Pierce lowered himself opposite her, his eyes not fierce now, but unguarded, stripped bare. Not carried, buried, until you walked into that auction and forced me to remember that some promises should never die. She looked at him, anger and awe warring inside her. So what was it then? Fate? Or just another way to manipulate me? The question cracked between them like lightning. Pierce inhaled sharply, then leaned forward, his voice dropping to something raw. Seraph, listen to me. I wanted you long before that auction. Long before the world turned you into a challenge I couldn't resist. I saw you years ago when your father introduced us. You probably don't remember. You were just a girl standing in the doorway, your eyes full of fire even then. Her breath hitched. Flashes surfaced. Faint, distant. A man in threadbare clothes shaking her father's hand while she lingered with paint-stained fingers behind the door. Pierce's gaze burned with quiet intensity. I never forgot. That day I promised myself that when I built everything, when I finally became the man your father believed I could be, I'd be worthy of that fire. And then I saw you again, at the auction, defying me, refusing to bow. And I knew. Seraph's chest heaved, her world spinning. His words carved through her resolve, exposing a truth she didn't know if she could trust. Why hide it? She asked, voice trembling. Why keep me in the dark if all of this is true? Because, Pierce said, his hand clenching into a fist against the table, truth can be as dangerous as lies. And I was afraid. Afraid you'd see only the monster I became, not the man your father once believed in. Silence stretched, thick with emotion. Seraph's eyes lingered on the sketches, the fragile lines of her father's dream. Then back to Pierce, who for once didn't look untouchable, but desperately human. And still, doubt gnawed. Her father had believed in this man, trusted him, perhaps even loved him like a son. But had Pierce's presence in her life now been fate, or had it been designed all along? Her throat tightened as she whispered the question into the charged air. What am I to you, Pierce? A promise? A prize? Or something real? His answer was quiet, but unflinching. You are the only thing I've ever wanted that money can't buy. Her heart trembled, and in that fragile moment of vulnerability, she knew the stakes had shifted forever. Would you trust a man who kept secrets if his heart seemed true? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear them. Rain threaded the city into a gray tapestry, blurring lights and faces as evening sank like a stone. Seraph stood beneath the narrow overhang of a shuttered florist, the awning dripping steadily, the cold biting at her wrists where her sleeves had ridden up. She'd come out for air and found only questions. Haven, the sketches, Pierce's voice when he said he'd wanted her long before the auction. Truth could be a balm, but tonight it felt like a blade. Seraph. The name slid through the rain with practiced softness. Bryson stepped from the shadows of the doorway beside her, closing his umbrella just as a gust shoved water across the sidewalk. His smile was sympathetic without warmth, a shape he wore the way other men wore cufflinks. You're soaked, he said, offering the umbrella to her. Walk with me? She hesitated, then took it. The rain drummed above her like an impatient clock. If this is about Pierce... It is, Bryson replied, falling into step. Because I can see you're about to make a choice you'll regret, and I'd hate to see you learn the hard way. You know about Haven? She swallowed. He showed me the sketches. He told me about Haven. He told me he knew my father. I don't think he lied. Of course he didn't, Bryson said gently. That's the trick. A good lie is 90% true. He needed you to know the story so you'd believe the ending. What ending? That he's the hero. Bryson glanced at her from beneath his lashes. He didn't reveal Haven to honor your father. He revealed it to secure you. He's turned the project into a noose, wrapped in nostalgia, tightened with guilt. He'll say he loves you, that he owes your father everything, that building Haven proves both. but he'll control it. He'll control you. Seraph clenched her jaw, anger flaring. You don't know what's in his heart. I know his patterns, Bryson said. He buys what he wants. He gets what he wants. It's not leverage, he says. It's legacy. It isn't acquisition. It's destiny. His voice softened to a pained murmur. You're not a destiny, Seraph. You're a woman who lost a father and wants to believe a man who claims to have loved him too. The rain hissed on the street. Traffic moaned. Seraph felt the umbrella handle slick in her grip. You think he'd weaponize my father's memory, she whispered. I think he already has, Bryson said. The timing isn't a coincidence. He tells you the story, shows you the sketches, and suddenly your heart has a door only he can open. He stepped in front of her, forcing her to stop. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust your fear. Ask who benefits if you surrender. She looked past him into the blur of lights. Doubt rose like tidewater, flooding what certainty she'd gathered since the gallery. She'd trembled at Pierce's honesty because it felt real, but it also felt like gravity, like an orbit that would pull her whether she chose it or not. Bryson lifted the umbrella higher, sheltering them both. Do one thing for me, he said. Ask him whether Haven has a board yet. Ask who chairs it. Ask who owns the land, who holds the controlling shares of the fund that will gift it to the city. He'll have answers, and you won't like them. He pressed the umbrella handle fully into her hand, then stepped back into the rain. Call me when you've asked, he said, and vanished into the wet. Seraph stood there, the umbrella a small island against the storm, the questions beating louder than the rain. She went to him. Pierce's penthouse wore the storm like a crown, glass walls sheeted in water, the skyline a bruised smear beyond. He stood with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled, phone clamped to his shoulder as he sketched numbers on a tablet. The room smelled faintly of cedar and lightning. He turned as the elevator hissed open. Relief flickered across his face. So brief a civilian might have missed it, but Seraph saw it, and it made her chest ache. Seraph, he said, setting the tablet aside. I didn't expect— Who owns the land? She asked, cutting cleanly through his welcome. For Haven, who owns the land underneath it? His posture shifted. Minutely, a warrior rebalancing weight before a strike. A holding company. Yours. Yes, a beat. Until the transfer. To whom? The foundation, he said, steady. Chaired by a board. You. It wasn't a question. For the first year, he said, voice hardening, to ensure it launches cleanly. How kind, she said, the words a tremor edged with ice. Who controls the fund? He didn't blink. I do. For now. For now, she echoed. Rain hammered the glass. Do you hear yourself? Do you hear what this sounds like from where I stand? He taught you to risk. He believed you could build something good, and you built a maze with your name at every exit. Because I will not let it be corrupted, Pierce snapped, moving closer. Do you know what happens to idealist projects without teeth? They starve. They become photo ops for men with less conviction than I have in my smallest finger. Your father wanted Haven to live. I'm making sure it does. She shook her head, tears hot and helpless. You're making sure you do. You're weaving him around your power so tightly that you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. His jaw worked. This is about protecting the dream. Is it? She took a step back. Or is it about binding me to you with a dream I can't walk away from without betraying him? He flinched, the smallest break in steel. Who told you that? Someone who might be wrong, she said, voice shaking. But every answer you've given me tonight makes him look right. Silence rolled out, heavy, electric. Pierce closed the final step between them, every line of him fierce with a desperation he rarely revealed. I don't know how to love small, he said raw. I learned to build with pressure and fire. When I told you I wanted you, I meant it. When I told you I owed your father, I meant that too. I can hold both. And I can't, she whispered, Not like this. Not when every road leads through you. He reached for her, stopped himself an inch from her wrist. Tell me what to change. She laughed once, broken. Start with the part where you trust someone else to hold power and you don't pull it back the first time they tremble. He exhaled hard, as if bracing for impact. Give me time. I gave you my heart, she said, and you built scaffolding around it. The elevator chimed, a bright note in a dark room. She took a step backward and then another. Seraph, he said, and her name sounded like a vow and a plea. I can't, she answered, and the words fell between them like a verdict. The elevator doors closed on the sight of him standing very still, like a man trying not to bleed where anyone could see. By morning, the market smelled blood. Bryson moved in daylight, charm honed to a scalpel. He met with 2 board members, presented a dossier threaded with truth and suggestion, concentrated control over charitable funds, conflicts in land acquisition, a founder blind to risk because of personal entanglements. He never said Seraph. He didn't have to. A journalist called. Bryson didn't leak. He posed questions. Why must the project's reigns begin and end with one man? Would the city accept a gift with that many strings? Insiders panicked. A rumor seeded in the right place did more damage than a lawsuit. By noon, 2 partners paused capital releases, pending clarifications. The stock dipped, but it was the calls Pierce cared about. Old allies clearing throats, politely requesting distance until the air was clean again. He took every call. He corrected. He refused to bend. He thought about calling Seraph, and did not. Seraph did not sleep. She sat at the kitchen table while Lauren brewed tea and didn't ask first. Dawn went slate, then pale yellow, then white. I need you to tell me I'm not crazy, Seraph said at last, voice hoarse. That walking away was right. Lauren set the mug down and knelt, cheek near Seraph's knee, the way you kneel beside a cliff edge to coax someone not to jump. Walking away from what hurts is never crazy. Seraph stared at the wall. He told me he'd wanted me for years. He said I'm the only thing he can't buy. And I felt it. I believed him. But believing him means believing he can hold that truth without holding everything else too. Lauren's grip tightened. You wanted a partner, not a savior. I wanted someone who didn't need to own the ground I stand on to promise not to move it, Seraph whispered. Tears burned again, less dramatic now, more relentless. And I wanted to stop wanting him. Wanting is not a sin, Lauren said. It's a compass. Sometimes it points to the fire, sometimes it points home. Seraph pressed her palms to her eyes. Bryson says Pierce uses guilt as currency. Pierce says he uses control to protect. She exhaled, trembling. I don't want to be someone's proof of goodness or someone's project that cannot be allowed to fail. Then don't, Lauren said, voice fierce. Stand outside both stories until you can hear your own. Seraph lowered her hands. The world looked clearer for a heartbeat, then blurred again. I'm done, she said quietly. I can't trust him. Lauren opened her mouth, closed it. She pulled Seraph into her arms instead and held on while the storm inside finally found its rein. Days stretched. Silence grew muscles. Pierce kept building even as doors shut, but he did it alone. Seraph kept breathing even as her chest felt rubble, but she did it far from the rooms where he might be. And with every hour they chose absence, separation stopped being an event and became a shape they lived inside. Seraph folded the sketches of Haven and placed them in a drawer she did not open. She painted and scraped the canvas clean, and painted again, as if color could argue with grief. At night, she lay awake and repeated a sentence until it sounded like truth. Never again. The rain had eased by dawn, leaving the streets washed clean, but Seraph still felt the storm inside her chest. She had tried to bury herself in routine, coffee, paints, ignoring her phone, but something gnawed at her. Bryson's words replayed endlessly. twisting with Pierce's confessions until she couldn't tell truth from manipulation. And then, fate handed her clarity. It began with a phone call she hadn't expected. Lauren's voice came sharp with urgency. "Seraph, you need to get to my office right now. Bring nothing, just come." Her pulse quickened. She didn't ask questions. Lauren was not dramatic without reason. Within the hour, Seraph was pushing open the glass doors of Lauren's small law practice, rain still clinging to her coat. Lauren was waiting with a folder thick enough to break spines. Her eyes glittered, fierce. "I thought I was chasing down loose ends for you, but I found something bigger. Something about Bryson." Seraph's throat tightened. "What about him?" Lauren spread the papers across her desk. Emails, contracts, investment reports stamped confidential. "He's been maneuvering against Pierce for months. And not just Pierce, your father too." Seraph froze. "My father's been gone for years." "Yes," Lauren said grimly. "But his name still lives in his work. And Bryson's been making sure that legacy looks tainted. Look here." She pointed to a series of transactions, her finger tapping the page with conviction. "This account shows he financed the smear campaign that painted your father's late projects as fraudulent, unviable. He leaked that nonsense about mismanaged funds, about debts. None of it was true. He wanted to bury the name Vale because he knew it tied to Pierce. And to you." Seraph's chest constricted. Her knees felt weak. "Why would he?" "Because," Lauren said softly, "if your father's reputation crumbled, then Pierce's connection to him would look like opportunism, not loyalty. Bryson set this up years ago, Seraph. He wasn't just trying to ruin Pierce's empire. He was trying to cut Haven off at the roots and use you as the final wedge." The folder swam before her. Bryson's patient smile, his gentle words, "Trust your fear." Her stomach turned. "He lied to me." Lauren's hand covered hers, grounding her. "No, he told you half-truths so you'd do the rest of the work yourself. He made you doubt the one man who was actually protecting your father's memory." Seraph's vision blurred with tears. For days she had carried the weight of betrayal, convinced Pierce had weaponized her grief. But now she saw the shape of the trap. Bryson had wanted her to walk away. Lauren leaned closer, voice fierce with love. "Don't let fear steal what love is offering. You know the truth now. The question is, will you let it set you free, or will you keep living like you're still in his cage?" Seraph swallowed hard, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. "I need to see him." Pierce's penthouse no longer glittered. The glass walls looked like hollow eyes, the lights dim, as if the empire itself had sagged under the weight of rumor. Seraph's chest clenched as she slipped past security, who no longer bowed with ease. The air smelled of smoke from an untouched fireplace, sharp and lonely. She found him in his study, jacket discarded, shirt rumpled, tie hanging loose around his neck. His hair fell forward as he leaned over a desk littered with papers and unanswered calls. For once, the man who moved markets looked like he was drowning in them. He didn't hear her at first. His hand gripped a glass of untouched whiskey, eyes fixed on the skyline that no longer gleamed for him. Vulnerability carved his silhouette into something unbearably human. "Pierce," she whispered. His head snapped up. For a heartbeat, raw hope lit his eyes before caution shuttered it. "Seraph." His voice was rough, a scrape of gravel. "Why are you here?" She stepped closer, trembling. "Because I was wrong." He set the glass down carefully, as though any sudden movement would break what fragile ground lay between them. "You made your choice. You said you couldn't trust me." Her throat closed. "Because I believed him. Bryson. He twisted everything you told me. He made me think Haven was just another way for you to own me. But I saw it. I saw proof he's been poisoning my father's name, tearing it down so no one would believe in you. Or in me." Pierce's jaw worked, pain flashing across his face. "I tried to shield you from that filth. And I thought that meant you were hiding things from me. she whispered. But you weren't. You were protecting what mattered. You were protecting him. Silence stretched, heavy and trembling. Then Pierce rose from his chair. Each movement waited, his eyes locked on hers with something almost broken. Do you have any idea, he said slowly, what it did to me when you walked away? When you believed him? Tears slipped down her cheeks. I do now. And I'm sorry. He stopped a breath away, close enough she could feel the storm of his pulse. His voice dropped to something ragged. I don't know how to love in halves, Seraph. I only know how to burn for what I want. And I wanted you, even if it meant scaring you away. Her hands trembled as she reached for him, palms pressing against the planes of his chest. Then burn for me. Just me. Not the dream. Not the empire. Not the memory of my father. Me. His eyes closed, a shudder breaking through him. When they opened again, they were raw and unguarded. If you ask me to stop fighting, I'll stop. For you, I'll let it all go. She shook her head fiercely. No, don't stop being who you are. Just let me stand beside you. No more walls, no more secrets. The words broke something open in both of them. He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing tears from her skin, and then his mouth was on hers. Desperate, confessional, a kiss that tasted of surrender and survival all at once. Her arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, their bodies pressed tight as though they could erase the canyon of days apart. His hands trembled where they held her, and the vulnerability in that touch undid her completely. When they broke apart, their breaths tangled in the air between them. I thought I lost you, he murmured. You did, she said softly, resting her forehead against his. But you found me again. And for the first time, she let herself believe that maybe love wasn't about control, or guilt, or unfinished debts. Maybe it was about this, two broken people choosing to stand together anyway. The night shimmered with chandeliers and whispered ambition. Clarita's annual gala was the kind of event where fortunes were made and reputations destroyed in a single breath. And this year the stakes felt sharper, hungrier. Rumors churned like champagne bubbles. Pierce's empire trembling, Seraph whispered about as the woman who had bewitched him, Bryson waiting in the wings like a wolf scenting blood. Seraph smoothed her gown with trembling hands as she stepped into the marble hall. Lauren's voice echoed in her head. Don't let fear steal what love is offering. But fear prowled her ribs all the same. She had chosen to stand at Pierce's side tonight, but the eyes of the city were sharp enough to cut skin. Pierce met her just inside the grand archway. He wore power like armor, but his eyes softened the instant they found hers. He didn't speak at first. He only offered his arm. She took it, heart thundering, and together they crossed the ballroom as one. Clarita floated toward them, radiant in crimson silk, her smile edged with knives. How poetic, she purred, kissing the air beside Seraph's cheek. The prodigal muse returns to her savior's side. I must admit, I doubted you'd appear after all those whispers. Seraph's chin lifted. Whispers don't change the truth. Clarita's brows arched, amused. And what truth would that be? Before Seraph could answer, Bryson arrived. His tuxedo gleamed, his smile precise. He bowed to Clarita, then turned deliberately toward the crowd gathering nearby. The truth, he announced, voice carrying, is that Pierce Davison has built his empire on lies. He claims to honor a dead man's dream, yet he hoards the land, the funds, the very legacy meant for artists. And this woman, he gestured at Seraph, his voice dripping with disdain, has been the convenient face of his deception, a tragic daughter manipulated into legitimizing his schemes. Gasps rippled like a wave. Seraph's stomach lurched, her skin burning under the weight of so many eyes. Pierce's voice cut through the noise like steel drawn from its sheath. Enough. The room stilled. He stepped forward, drawing Seraph with him, until they stood in the circle of light at the room's center. His gaze swept the crowd, his words steady, deliberate. Yes, I knew her father. Yes, he mentored me when I was nothing. And yes, together we dreamed of Haven, a place for artists who deserved more than scraps. That dream was never mine to own. It was ours. He looked down at Seraph, and his voice softened, though it carried to every corner. I never wanted her to carry that burden. I wanted her to know that she is not proof of my legacy. She is my legacy, my choice, my love. The silence cracked into murmurs, startled, skeptical, hungry for more. Bryson's smile didn't falter, but his eyes glinted sharp. A fine speech. But words don't erase documents. The contracts show you as sole controller, the land in your name, the funds under your seal. Tell me, Pierce, how does that look to anyone who isn't blinded by infatuation? Seraph's pulse spiked, but then Lauren, bold as fire, appeared from the crowd, a folder in hand. It looks, she declared, like Bryson's projection. Because these documents? She snapped the folder open, scattering papers across the table nearest the dais. Prove who's been leaking slander about the Vale name for years. Prove who's been manipulating investors behind closed doors. And it isn't Pierce. Gasps again, sharper this time. Heads swiveled. The papers bore Bryson's signature, his accounts, his transactions funding the smear campaigns. Seraph's voice, clear and fierce, carried into the charged silence. You told me Pierce was binding me with guilt. But it was you all along. You poisoned my father's name to bury Haven before it breathed. You made me doubt the only man who fought to protect it. Bryson's mask slipped, fury cracking through. You think one woman's accusation and a few forged pages will change? Forged? Clarita's laugh cut in, cold and delighted. Darling, I've been in this game longer than you've been scheming. Those signatures are as real as the perfume on my wrist. Seems you overplayed your hand. The crowd erupted. Investors leaned into each other, whispering, weighing allegiances. Reporters scribbled. The tide had shifted in seconds, and Bryson's control snapped like glass underfoot. He lunged toward Seraph, words bitter. You'll regret siding with him. But Pierce was already there, hand firm against Bryson's chest, his voice thunderous. Touch her, and you'll regret breathing. Security closed in. Bryson's protests dissolved under the roar of scandal as he was led away, his empire unraveling in real time. The ballroom buzzed with fever, but Seraph heard none of it. Pierce still stood before her, his hand falling slowly back to his side, his chest heaving. For the first time, he looked not like a man who had won, but a man stripped bare in front of the world. He turned to her, eyes raw. I meant what I said. You are not my father's promise. You are not Haven's shadow. You are the only thing I chose without strategy. The only thing I will fight for until I have nothing left. The room blurred around her, their whispers fading. Seraph stepped into him, her hand lifting to cup his face. And I choose you. Not because of what you built, not because of what you protected. Because you fought for me. Because you loved me even when I doubted. His breath hitched, his forehead resting against hers. Say it again. I choose you, she whispered, sealing the vow with a kiss that silenced the room more thoroughly than any scandal ever could. The world spun, applause breaking like thunder, cameras flashing, Clarita clapping with ironic glee. But Seraph felt only his arms around her, the steady beat of his heart against hers. For the first time since the auction, since the night her father's painting slipped through her fingers, she didn't feel like she was losing. She felt like she had won something greater, something irrevocable. Love, fierce and unbought. The night shimmered with chandeliers and whispered ambition. Clarita's annual gala was the kind of event where fortunes were made and reputations destroyed in a single breath. And this year the stakes felt sharper, hungrier. Rumors churned like champagne bubbles, Pierce's empire trembling. Seraph whispered about as the woman who had bewitched him, Bryson waiting in the wings like a wolf scenting blood. Seraph smoothed her gown with trembling hands as she stepped into the marble hall. Lauren's voice echoed in her head. Don't let fear steal what love is offering. but fear prowled her ribs all the same. She had chosen to stand at Pierce's side tonight, but the eyes of the city were sharp enough to cut skin. Pierce met her just inside the grand archway. He wore power like armor, but his eyes softened the instant they found hers. He didn't speak at first. He only offered his arm. She took it, heart thundering, and together they crossed the ballroom as one. Clarita floated toward them, radiant in crimson silk, her smile edged with knives. "How poetic," she purred, kissing the air beside Seraph's cheek. "The prodigal muse returns to her savior's side. I must admit I doubted you'd appear after all those whispers." Seraph's chin lifted. "Whispers don't change the truth." Clarita's brows arched, amused. And what truth would that be? Before Seraph could answer, Bryson arrived. His tuxedo gleamed, his smile precise. He bowed to Clarita, then turned deliberately toward the crowd gathering nearby. "The truth," he announced, voice carrying, "is that Pierce Davison has built his empire on lies. He claims to honor a dead man's dream. Yet he hoards the land, the funds, the very legacy meant for artists. And this woman," he gestured at Seraph, his voice dripping with disdain, "has been the convenient face of his deception, a tragic daughter manipulated into legitimizing his schemes." Gasps rippled like a wave. Seraph's stomach lurched, her skin burning under the weight of so many eyes. Pierce's voice cut through the noise like steel drawn from its sheath. "Enough!" The room stilled. He stepped forward, drawing Seraph with him, until they stood in the circle of light at the room's center. His gaze swept the crowd, his words steady, deliberate. "Yes, I knew her father. Yes, he mentored me when I was nothing. And yes, together we dreamed of Haven, a place for artists who deserved more than scraps. That dream was never mine to own. It was ours." He looked down at Seraph, and his voice softened, though it carried to every corner. "I never wanted her to carry that burden. I wanted her to know that she is not proof of my legacy. She is my legacy. My choice. My love." The silence cracked into murmurs, startled, skeptical, hungry for more. Bryson's smile didn't falter, but his eyes glinted sharp. "A fine speech, but words don't erase documents. The contracts show you as sole controller, the land in your name, the funds under your seal. Tell me, Pierce, how does that look to anyone who isn't blinded by infatuation?" Seraph's pulse spiked, but then Lauren, bold as fire, appeared from the crowd, a folder in hand. "It looks," she declared, "like Bryson's projection, because these documents—" She snapped the folder open, scattering papers across the table nearest the dais. "Prove who's been leaking slander about the Vale name for years. Prove who's been manipulating investors behind closed doors. And it isn't Pierce." Gasps again, sharper this time. Heads swiveled. The papers bore Bryson's signature, his accounts, his transactions funding the smear campaigns. Seraph's voice, clear and fierce, carried into the charged silence. "You told me Pierce was binding me with guilt. But it was you all along. You poisoned my father's name to bury Haven before it breathed. You made me doubt the only man who fought to protect it." Bryson's mask slipped, fury cracking through. "You think one woman's accusation and a few forged pages will change—" "Forged?" Clarita's laugh cut in, cold and delighted. "Darling, I've been in this game longer than you've been scheming. Those signatures are as real as the perfume on my wrist. Seems you overplayed your hand." The crowd erupted. Investors leaned into each other, whispering, weighing allegiances. Reporters scribbled. The tide had shifted in seconds, and Bryson's control snapped like glass underfoot. He lunged toward Seraph, words bitter. "You'll regret siding with him." But Pierce was already there, hand firm against Bryson's chest, his voice thunderous. "Touch her, and you'll regret breathing." Security closed in. Bryson's protests dissolved under the roar of scandal as he was led away, his empire unraveling in real time. The ballroom buzzed with fever, but Seraph heard none of it. Pierce still stood before her, his hand falling slowly back to his side, his chest heaving. For the first time, he looked not like a man who had won, but a man stripped bare in front of the world. He turned to her, eyes raw. I meant what I said. You are not my father's promise. You are not Haven's shadow. You are the only thing I chose without strategy. The only thing I will fight for until I have nothing left. The room blurred around her, their whispers fading. Seraph stepped into him, her hand lifting to cup his face. And I choose you. Not because of what you built, not because of what you protected, because you fought for me. Because you loved me even when I doubted. His breath hitched, his forehead resting against hers. Say it again. I choose you, she whispered, sealing the vow with a kiss that silenced the room more thoroughly than any scandal ever could. The world spun, applause breaking like thunder, cameras flashing, Clarita clapping with ironic glee, but Seraph felt only his arms around her, the steady beat of his heart against hers. For the first time since the auction, since the night her father's painting slipped through her fingers, she didn't feel like she was losing. She felt like she had won something greater, something irrevocable. Love, fierce and unbought. The city was quieter now, or maybe it was just me. For the first time in years, the roar of business, the constant shifting of markets, the endless noise of victory and loss felt far away. What I heard instead was the steady rhythm of her footsteps echoing down the hall, the soft thud of her sketchbook closing in the living room, the sound of home. I stood in front of the easel where the painting had been carefully restored, the colors breathing again like veins of fire and memory. Her father's brushstrokes glowed in the light of the morning sun, every line alive with the love he had poured into it. For weeks, I'd kept it hidden, repaired, made whole again by hands who understood reverence as much as skill. Tonight, it would be hers. The door creaked behind me. Seraph's voice, low and curious, curled through the quiet. You've been keeping secrets again. I turned, guilt softening into something else when I saw her in the doorway. Barefoot, her hair a wild crown from sleep, eyes narrowing in suspicion she couldn't hide behind humor. This one's different, I murmured. I reached for the cloth draped over the frame, fingers pausing for a breath before pulling it away. The painting filled the room, her father's legacy in full bloom. Seraph gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth, tears rising unbidden. It was always yours, I said, stepping closer. Not mine, not the world's. Yours. The last piece of him you swore you wouldn't lose. You didn't. I only held it until I could place it where it belonged. Her hands trembled as she reached for the canvas, then for me, fingers curling into my shirt as if she needed both anchors at once. You gave it back. I brushed a tear from her cheek. I gave it home. For a long moment, there was nothing but her quiet sob, her smile breaking through the grief, and the fire of something new sparking between us. Not rivalry, not resistance, not fear. Partnership. She leaned into me, her voice muffled against my chest. You kept your promise to him? No, I whispered into her hair. We did. A week later, Lauren sat across from us at the cafe, tapping her nails against her mug while Seraph teased her about working too much. Lauren rolled her eyes, though her blush betrayed her when her phone buzzed and she smiled in spite of herself. Who is he? Seraph pressed, her grin wicked. No one, Lauren protested too quickly. I chuckled, watching them. No one wouldn't have you glowing like that. Lauren tossed a napkin at me, but her laughter was softer, easier than I'd seen in years. Hope lingered in her smile, the kind that meant maybe her own story was beginning. And I thought, yes, the world shifts. Love finds cracks to grow through, even in stone. That night, Seraph and I stood on the balcony of our home, the city stretched beneath us in lights and shadows. She leaned against me, her sketchbook tucked under her arm, her father's painting glowing from the wall inside. We had spent so long circling each other like adversaries, mistaking fear for protection and pride for strength. Now I understood what strength truly was. Letting her stand beside me without chains. Letting her love me not for what I owned, but for what I had almost lost. She turned to me, her eyes reflecting the skyline. We're not rivals anymore. No, I said, pressing a kiss to her temple. We're partners, in haven, in life, in everything. Her smile was slow, certain. In love. I held her tighter, my chest aching with a peace I'd thought I'd never know. She came to protect her heart, I thought, my hand brushing over hers where it rested against my chest. But what she found was someone who guarded it as fiercely as she did, and that was enough, more than enough. Do you believe true love can be won in the unlikeliest of places? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear your story.